The burial site of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, has been a wonder to archaeologists since its discovery. The phenomenal terracotta army surrounding it is the first of its kind, a true hidden treasure. However, scientists have uncovered new secrets about this ancient emperor and his magnificent grave army, things that no one would have ever imagined. The mass of ground with these figures is indescribable. What new secrets have been uncovered about China's first emperor and his legion of terracotta soldiers? How does this new information impact our view of ancient Chinese people and the world at large? Join us in this video as scientists finally opened the tomb of China's first emperor, sealed for thousands of years. Qin Shi Huang was the first emperor of China, and the legend of this ancient ruler is one of awe and wonder. It all dates back to about 246 BC when China, as we know it today, didn't exist. Instead, there were 7 small kingdoms in the region, each with its own king and army. These kingdoms often fought each other in epic clashes for supremacy. In one of these kingdoms, named Qin, a young king was set to ascend the throne at just 13 years of age. 13 years may seem like an early age to rule, but in those times, it was unpredictable how long a king would live. Some kings died before 40, so it was typical for the next king to assume the throne as soon as possible. When the boy King Qin ascended the throne at 13 years old, everyone probably thought he would end up like his predecessors. No one imagined that he would do something no king had ever done. No one imagined he would become the first emperor. Qin had an advisor named Lu Buwei and a loyal general named Wang Jian. With their help, he was able to crush all his rivals in a series of intense warfare, unifying the 7 kingdoms under his command and forming the Qin Empire, which later became modern-day China. By 221 BC, Emperor Qin had become the most powerful man in the world, becoming the first emperor in China. For Emperor Qin, keeping the other kingdoms under wraps entailed utilizing a combination of diplomacy, deception, and brute force. Han was the first state to join the emperor's wing, followed by Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yang, and Qi. However, this emperor's ambition was much bigger than a unified China. He wanted to make it as glorious as possible so his name would be etched in the sands of time. He launched many projects to improve the administration and culture of the economy. This involved building roads, canals, and most famously, the Great Wall of China. He also standardized the writing system and the currency of the Qin dynasty. To show how much he loved conquest, Emperor Qin sent out his servants on expeditions to explore and map out the lands beyond unified China. But it was clear that he wished to conquer more lands, and this is what many believe drove him to seek something no other emperor had sought: immortality. One thing history doesn't fail to remind us about Emperor Qin Shi Huang is that he was obsessed with being immortal. The truth is that ancient China was known for its wars and chaos. Kings could get betrayed, defeated, overthrown, or even assassinated. Seeing how powerful he had become and how much more land he still wanted to conquer, it was important for this emperor to find a way to preserve his reign, and so the search for the immortal elixir began. Qin Shi Huang spent outrageous sums of money and resources funding envoys to seek out a secret potion or substance that could meet his purpose. It was as though the young emperor knew he wouldn't live very long because he only reigned from 221 to 210 BC. He died during one of his tours of inspection, but before his demise, he gave the world something phenomenal, what would become one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time. He built a phenomenal structure at his burial site, an impressive mausoleum that stayed hidden for over 2,000 years. This imperial legacy was actually uncovered in 1974. The discovery was never premeditated. Local farmers were simply excavating a water well when they encountered some of the crafted structures of the tomb. The initial discoverer was a local farmer named Yang Zhifa. After he and a few of his colleagues saw several terracottas, they reported the discovery to the local authorities. These men had no idea of the significance or value of what they found. In fact, they never knew that what they found would become what we now know as the Terracotta Army. The Terracotta Army is an army of human-sized soldiers buried beside the Qin Emperor. The entire army was found underground by archaeologists after the initial findings of the local farmers. Today, it is one of the most extraordinary discoveries ever made. The discovery almost single-handedly transformed the Chinese economy, bringing significant revenue from tourists and scholars who came to examine the terracotta army. The terracotta army consists of 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, 520 horses, and 150 cavalry horses. Every figure was positioned according to its rank, taking its rightful place as it would in a typical battle formation. One interesting thing about this army is that no two figures look alike. Some have beards, some do not. Some are fat, some aren't. The hairstyles and facial features are also unique for all the soldiers, and some are crafted in a specific design or type of armor, depicting their rank. The level of attention to detail in the terracotta army is superb, and it gets even more interesting when you consider that these figures were crafted over 2,000 years ago yet display such a high level of excellence in artistry. How they managed to stay preserved till today is another mystery. Surely you can imagine how many resources it took to build something like this at the time. This phenomenal work of art just goes to show how rich and powerful the Qin dynasty was. In 1987, the Qin Mausoleum and the Terracotta Army were officially labeled a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Ever since it came into the limelight, experts and scholars have been working hard to try and find out how the ancient Chinese people were able to accomplish such a feat. The level of artistry depicted in the Terracotta Army is mind-boggling. Everything was made to look realistic, from the armor to the weapons and facial features. Bear in mind that we are talking about 210 BC here. Back then, technology wasn't as sophisticated as it is now, so the level of skill it took to do something like this must be out of this world. It is believed that the soldiers were crafted in some sort of assembly line, with different craftsmen specializing in specific body parts. After assembling, each statue was then reworked to add unique features like facial expressions and so on. There must have been special units that crafted the weapons these soldiers wielded, as research has shown that the weapons were crafted with accuracy and precision, just as the soldiers themselves. Soldiers in the terracotta army wield weapons like swords, spears, arrows, and crossbows. These weapons were so well made that some of them have stayed sharp and strong despite over 2 millennia passing. Experts have found that most of these weapons had a layer of chrome plating, which further ensured their longevity. But then you may wonder, why would an emperor pour in tons of money, skill, and resources to build an army of lifeless clay men and horses? What purpose did the terracotta army really serve? Well, it all boils down to the ancient traditions that prevailed during the time. Every king who ruled a dynasty was entitled to a befitting tomb. It wasn't uncommon to find kings making artifacts and all sorts of structures at their burial sites. So imagine what would be done for one who wasn't just a king but an emperor, the first of his kind. Surely he deserved a befitting burial site. The tomb builders picked a site about 89 kilometers from the palace on the slopes of a mountain called Liishan. Initially, no one would have thought that this tomb would turn out to be one of the greatest tombs ever built. But as the legend of China's emperor unfolded, no one could deny that he needed a burial site worth remembering for ages. It wasn't just a tomb but a monument to the most powerful man in history. This is what prompted the creation of a spectacular burial site. According to ancient records, the tomb of China's first emperor measured up to 115 meters high and boasted a chamber about 80 meters by 50 meters in dimension. It was surrounded by a stone wall 15 meters long and 125 meters wide. Something like this took many years to build, which is why some theorists suggest that the emperor must have begun building his mausoleum not long after he ascended the throne. Archaeological experts estimate that Emperor Qin's tomb must have stretched up to about 500 meters on each side of its base, making it much bigger than the famous Egyptian pyramids. However, 2 millennia of wind and rain must have eroded the tomb's massive base. According to ancient accounts, the architects and engineers went the extra mile to recreate the emperor's palace inside the burial chamber. Even the tiniest details, like the rivers flowing through the kingdom, were represented. It was as though they planned for the emperor to rule in eternity just as he did on earth. However, what the ancient accounts failed to mention was the magnificent army hidden away in 3 pits at one corner of the tomb. Archaeologists who investigated the pits confessed that they had never seen such complex and splendid ancient terracottas. Besides the terracotta army, there was one other shocking thing about this tomb. Kings of ancient China were obsessed with the afterlife. It wasn't unusual for 1 or 2 human lives to be sacrificed in the king's burial. Such people were meant to serve the king on his way to the afterlife. Some of them would be those who were already serving the king, but others were specifically chosen for this purpose. Emperor Qin was no different. Upon his death, 48 concubines and many servants were buried alive in the tomb. Some accounts say that as many as 500 people were buried alongside the emperor. But not everyone could be buried alive, some were simply killed and buried with him. What was common for the burial of all kings of ancient China was that there were always traps set for tomb raiders. Emperor Qin had to protect his prized possessions, so he didn't leave this aspect out when designing his tomb. Historical records suggest that his burial site had several traps, and one of the most famous was the use of mercury. In the ancient burial chambers of China, emperors often asked the engineers to recreate rivers using mercury, and this tomb wasn't an exception. Many believe that these traps must have killed off any tomb raiders. In fact, this is one reason archaeologists haven't gone into the tomb to see what's inside. Despite all the fascinating discoveries made by archaeologists, the main chamber of Emperor Qin's tomb has not been opened. After over 40 years of excavation, experts have admitted that the tomb still holds more mysteries than solutions.